Before we take a deep dive into episode 10, let me ask you a question. Do you believe that you are a cricket expert? Huh.
If you do believe that and haven't tried our T20 quiz so far,
then your fame is of no use. Head on to our website www.cricketnews.com. This is www.cricketnews.com to try out your wits in the Mayanti Langer T20 World Cup quiz right now.
Are you a cricket expert? Play my ultimate cricket quiz on Facebook Messenger and prove it today.
Hello and welcome to the Cricket News Podcast. I am Rahul Pandey, and so we are back this week, and the agenda of conversation has to be one of the quotes that came after India's second game in the T20 World Cup in the Super 12 round. It was Jasprit Bumrah who went into the press conference and told us a lot about mental fatigue that is around Team India as of now. That this is going to be our conversation for this week's episode. And let's just brush up our memory as to how much cricket these players have played since September 2020, which is when the IPL began. It was a 2-month tournament. They went to Australia in November once it was done. And it was a 3 ODI, 3 T20 and a 4 Test match series there. And in January, post mid-January, they returned to India. It was a 10-day gap before the England tour of India began. 4 Test match series followed by 5 T20Is and 3 T20s, and 3 one-days, all of them ending on March 30th. It was then time for IPL 2021. Began in April beginning, and then was suspended midway in the first week of May. And there was a 1-month gap, but let's not forget that India traveled to England at the end of the month, and they played the World Test Championship final in June, a 1-month gap again before the England Test series began, the 5-match Test series, 4 Test matches played there, and then they came to UAE for the second leg of IPL 2021, and then it was, of course, time for the T20 World Cup. So there's been a lot of cricket played over the last 1 year or so. And so we're going to talk about how big a factor can that be for this Indian team. Joining me is Abhishek Mukherjee, Senior Editor of Cricket News. Hi, Abhishek da. How are you?
I'm fine.
Also joining from Dubai with his coffee is Sandipan Banerjee. Too early for you, sir, but we were thankful that you've joined us for this one because you've seen the team play up close and would have noticed a few things or so, even in the training sessions. So let's start it. Sandipan, what are your thoughts on Jasprit Bumrah's words after the India-New Zealand match?
Well, first thing first, I'm not in Dubai right now. I'm in Abu Dhabi for the Afghanistan game.
Traveling.
That's
yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. The thing is, I partially agree with Jasprit Bumrah on this, because if you see the current Indian T20 side, which has like the first choice 11 or the first 12, 13 players who have been part of that 11, how many of the players were the part of the IPL playoffs? I think it is Shardul Thakur, who played 1 game here, in this World T20. Ravindra Jadeja. Who else?
Virat Kohli won the eliminator match.
Virat Kohli, of course. Yeah, Virat Kohli won. So apart from them,
Rishabh Pant.
Yeah, Rishabh Pant and Ashwin was not. Ashwin was part of Delhi, but he is yet to play a game here.
Yeah.
So 3 players only played. 3 out of your core group have featured in the playoff round, right?
Mm-hmm.
So before the playoff round, players got 1 week break.
Yeah,
and their families are with them. I completely understand the biobubble fatigue and the point which Bumrah raised in that press conference.
Mm-hmm.
But when they were in England, they got a 1-month break after the World Test Championship final, and the start between the World Test Championship final and the start of that 4 Test series, right?
Mm-hmm.
At that time, they got their families were traveling with them. Also, after coming to UAE, those players who were not a part of the playoffs, they got a break. Then India got a break. India played their first game against Pakistan on 24th. Then India had another 1 week break. In fact, Virat Kohli in the pre-match press conference, he said the team had nothing much to do. I mean, so I mean, I think the only player who is fatigued is I think Ravindra Jadeja. I mean, he has been playing consistently for a while. So, but he is the one who attended all the optional practice sessions as well.
Okay.
So I mean, that's why I said that I partially agree with Bumrah on this. But obviously, mental fatigue. I mean, staying in a bubble, mental fatigue. Of course, it plays a part. But not as much as the media has been reporting of late.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, sure. I think there's some valid points there. Abhishek, I do believe that more than the physical aspect of things, I do believe that mental fatigue is playing a big role, because cricket in 2020 or cricket in 2021, one might argue that India were playing a series a month at the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020, the series against Bangladesh, the series against West Indies, followed by Australia, Sri Lanka, going to New Zealand. But then they weren't restricted to a bio bubble back then. That's a different aspect of our game altogether. What are your thoughts on this?
Just want to come in here. Before Abhishek, I want to come in here.
Yeah, sure.
If we are talking about the mental fatigue of the Indian team, what about the Indian team? Some of their players also featured in the 100 as well. None of the Indian players were there in the 100. But these players, they featured in 100, the test matches, the IPL, and now they are playing here and they are unbeaten so far in the competition. So
but they were trailing in the test series against India at home, and they were thrashed in India. So essentially, England are doing well at T20, but were humiliated in Test cricket in India, at home against New Zealand, and they are still trailing the Test series against India.
No, so but they were also part of the bubble. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So I mean, England didn't. England are doing well here, but England didn't do well in Test cricket. During the same phase, England played 4 and 4, 8 and to 10 Test matches. They won 2 and they lost. They lost basically 7, I think.
Yeah.
No, I think they lost 6.
Yeah.
And 6 of these Test matches were at home. So essentially, India have lost 2 Test matches, 2 T20s. They did poorly in that. There's no doubt about that. But if you compare with England, you have to mention that England have lost 6 Test matches in the same over the same period, and including 3 at home.
Yeah. Let's also talk about
their home summer leads. Basically, 1 win and 3 defeats.
Yeah, and let's also talk about the number of players who've been common as far as the Test team and T20I setup is concerned. That's also going to be a big thing. Abhishek, that we talked about this back in June itself. I think, looking at how things were turning out to be as far as India's squad for Sri Lanka was in the planning. And we now know, if we are to progress ahead in what's only going to be a more hectic timeline after the T20 World Cup, not just India, but I guess quite a few teams will have to apply that formula if they are to progress and if they are to win big titles.
I didn't get the question.
So the 2-team formula, the separate team, the separate team formula.
I think that is if bio bubbles are going to be part of the part of cricket, then 2 teams will have to be there, because cricket is not going to be any less, which means the stress is not going to be any less. So the only way out is divide the stress among more players. That will be good for everyone around the world.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about this. It'll benefit every team. It will also mean more contracts and more money for the cricketers. Yeah. It will also mean more money for the more scope for the sponsors, more money for the boards, more exposure for the cricketers. If you divide the labor, that is always a plus. And essentially what can happen is, and it's of course good for the fans, because number of matches will go up. The only reason why India can't play a test match against New Zealand and a T20 series against, say, West Indies at the same time is because the cricketers won't be able to do it. But if India sends two teams, it can be done. There's no actual reason why that cannot be done.
But the broadcaster revenue will be divided.
Yeah.
And
No, that's okay.
that's the big thing.
So essentially, the broadcaster revenue wasn't divided during when India played in England and in Sri Lanka. Essentially, we have to make
Not
sure
on the same days.
Yeah. So all they have to make sure is that the matches do not coincide. So essentially, if there is a test match in test series in England, they play a test match in England, they will give a 5-day gap. And another Indian team can be playing two T20s against, say, another completely different England outfit. In the gap. So essentially, two India teams are playing against two England teams. There is no actual reason why that can't happen. If you send your, the only thing that will happen is the cricketers who play both formats may miss out on the T20s because I think they'll prioritize test cricket. But that often happens in any way. I don't think Kohli and Rohit are going to play the New Zealand test T20s. I don't think Bumrah will play. So that will happen.
Bumrah will not. Kohli will not. Rohit might if he get the captaincy then.
So why is there this compulsion to? I mean, why I don't get the restriction on two simultaneous squads. That can always happen. We saw it happen, and had COVID not hit the Indian contingency, it would have been a smooth series in Sri Lanka.
Yeah,
that could have happened anytime.
Yeah,
and in fact, COVID also hit the Indian contingency in England, so it could have happened anyway. But that cannot be a reason. It can always happen. So if India have to make a full tour of England, all formats, I can't see a reason why both India and England cannot have separate squads for tests and
in fact, before the COVID, I can remember one instance when Australia played a T20 in Melbourne. And on the next day, they played a test match in Pune.
Yes. So essentially,
2017.
They played the T20 against Melbourne, against Sri Lanka, and they won both the T20 and the Test match.
Yeah,
there have been plenty of instances from the past, mostly involving England when the game was being spread. But in the 1973 Women's World Cup, England fielded two sides. They called one England, and the other called the other Young England. So there were two sides. The matches, England played against Young England. The match got ODI status. In 1994-95, England were a terrible side at that point. So Australia, instead of their annual triangular series, they converted to a quadrangular series. They invited England, they invited Zimbabwe, and they had two other sides, Australia and Australia A. And Australia and Australia A played in the final. And the selectors kept switching players between Australia and Australia A throughout the tournament. So some cricketers played for both sides, against both sides. It is doable if they want to. That way, cricketers also get more exposure and more rest.
Yeah, definitely.
So essentially, if you play a T20 side, you're handing out more T20 caps, more international caps. You're giving more exposure to cricketers. At the same time, you're giving test cricketers the rest they need.
Yeah.
You're helping both. The cricketers are also earning more because of the central. They may lose out on some match fees, but they are getting central contracts. I can't see a problem as long as the matches do not clash. But even that can be done. Matches are not clashing anyway. So there can be a test match, then there can be 3 T20s, then can be another test match. Separate teams playing.
So Sandipan, I want to come back to you on this because for the next 1 decade, there is at least a single ICC tournament every year. And it's going to be something now if teams are choosing to keep separate individuals for separate formats. they might as well have to think for the long haul, because it's about these tournaments which you're going to plan a team for. The bilateral T20I series, in the words of India's head coach currently, Ravi Shastri, also doesn't make sense that much. He would want test series to be there for the T20Is. As far as bilateral T20I series are concerned, he didn't want to give them that much attention in the piece that he wrote a few days back. But what's your idea on this? It will be tough, because there is a T20 World Cup the next year. There's a one-day World Cup the year after. And so it's going to be some process if teams are bifurcating players for formats.
Yeah, I mean, that is going to be the future anyway. I mean, whatever Abhishek has just said, I mean, it is going to be the future. And I mean, if there was no COVID, maybe it would have been delayed for a year or two. But now with COVID, I think that is the only way forward. You can prepare. I mean, now if you want to build a team, that's actually my concern. It's like if you are trying to build a team for the T20 World Cup 2022. But if your main players like the Kohlis, the Sharmas, the KL Rahuls, they don't play the format often. They just, because they have been playing, they are more focused on test cricket and all. And just before the tournament, they played like 5-10 games and 2 warm-up games. How effective they will be in a T20 World Cup, the format which they don't play often. I mean, I know IPL is a very good preparation. IPL is probably the most competitive T20 league in the world. But apart from that, internationally also, like off record, you were saying about the England, you are giving example of the England football team, right?
Yeah.
So you need to gel up as an international side, going into a tournament. Look at the Pakistan team. Look at the way England still had that 100 and or most of their players, all feature in the IPL. So it is all about the bonding and gel up going into the big event. So I believe that is going to be a huge concern. Like if your main players are not playing, like if you are like keeping some players away from T20 cricket throughout the year, and just before a World Cup or a mega event, you just ask them to play 5-10 games and 2 warm-up games and then feature in the World Cup, then this will happen, because this is the format they're not accustomed to. They're not accustomed to score with a strike rate of 140 odd, which Jason Roy always does. And you can
that's a fair point. That's a valid point.
Yeah, and they did back.
Around the world, there is a very curious concept. I mean, that you take the domestic T20 franchisee league seriously, you take the ICC tournament seriously, but when it comes to bilateral T20s, you rest your main players.
Yeah.
And what is the point in playing them? I mean, then and if you do that, why not have separate squads anyway?
Yeah.
Why not do that officially instead of just resting your main T20 players just like that?
Yeah, I mean, India is the biggest example of that, right? That in 2007 T20 World Cup, India rested their big players, and
they said they won't play. Now, in the current Indian seniors can very well say. Sometimes I wonder. I have always thought about it. What if Rahul Dravid had said, "I want to play the T20 World Cup"? Would India have won it?
Come on. Rahul Dravid had hit 3 sixes in his only team.
I mean,
that's a fair record.
Ganguly, Tendulkar, and Dravid had all 3 of them played in the T20 World Cup. Would India have won it? I really doubt this.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah,
but
that's a fair point.
For Rahul Dravid to have that record in his one international T20 outing is quite the thing. But yes, I do believe we were talking about this back in February when England were very much around the idea of workload management, keeping their players fit for other formats, format-wise, let's say. And now I do believe that for India, it's going to be a task ahead, because you have to plan out for these big tournaments. The World Test Championship matches will continue over the course of the next one year and a half. There will be preparation for the T20 World Cup going on. The one-day World Cup preparation will be up. So if you are planning for the big tournaments.
One day still happen?
They do.
They do.
We
We
will have a World Cup in 2020.
Okay, they do. Okay, tell me, when was the last time 2 full member sides played an ODI? Men's sides.
Was it England?
Do you even remember?
The
I don't
England
remember.
India
Yeah.
series in March.
India, England.
The 3-match series.
I don't
in
remember.
Pune.
How long was it? How long was it?
Just around the corner, Abhishek. Not that far back.
Nobody plays ODIs. It's either Test cricket, which is going to be there, and the T20s mostly as preparation.
England played
for World
Sri
Cup.
Lanka, right? England played
Yeah,
Sri
at
Lanka or
home.
Pakistan at home.
After that,
Yeah.
after that they played. I think India played Sri Lanka after that.
Yeah,
India did play, but
Yeah.
it wasn't a full-fledged sort of. Of course, England also didn't go ahead with their first 11 in that series. But yeah, I get the idea. There will be a World Cup in 2023 to remind us that this format is still there. And I, for one,
And then
would like
I'll tell you.
So
I'll
ICC
tell you what
ICC
will happen. There'll be a
ICC is
tournament.
bringing back Champions Trophy, right? ICC
Yeah.
is bringing
Yeah.
back Champions Trophy.
yeah.
I'll tell you what will happen. 1 year or maybe 8 months before that, the big ICC tournament, tournament, every team will suddenly focus on playing ODIs. And the moment the World Cup gets over, they'll stop playing ODIs and focus on the next tournament, which will be T20. So essentially, the two T20s and ODIs will both exist, but going forward, what will happen is they will rarely feature as part of the same tour. It will be either Test ODI or Test T20, depending on which ICC tournament is next.
Yeah, ACC has moved it. I mean, Asian Cricket Council has is doing it for years now. Whenever there is a ODI World Cup, Asia Cup happens in ODI format. Before a T20 World Cup happens in T20.
2016 was the scenario for that. But yeah, okay. Now this is the question which has been prevalent in football world as well. A World Cup every 2 years. But I thought about this in context of cricket, which has to deal with multiple formats. Because a T20 World Cup once every 2 years, one day World Cup once every 4 years. There will be a Champions Trophy in between as well. Does cricket need to keep the idea of a T20 World Cup once every 2 years rather than 4 years, the same as a 50-over World Cup?
You cannot just think about the full members. Think about the associates. They don't get to play the full 50-over World Cup. So that is T20
given a chance, given a choice, I will rather scrap the Champions Trophy and make it and get a full-fledged T20 a big T20 tournament somewhere involving associates.
A big T20 World Cup with everyone playing for qualifiers. Other than the host, everyone has to qualify.
Yeah, host
for the
and
tournament.
defending champions.
Yeah.
Host and defending champions. That should be the rule. Everyone else has to qualify. You cannot have 6 teams qualifying automatically.
Now they will do away with the format, with India not qualifying this year. I think probably in near future they will do away with this format. ICC. That's gone. So
well,
it's good for the associates.
Yeah, it can be good for quite a few of them, but yeah, it's a tough task keeping track of these formats, arranging
instead
them.
Instead of quarterfinals, of course, I would rather have 2 groups of 8 teams instead of 4 groups of 4 teams. Because the advantage of T20 is, as we are seeing, unlike in ODIs, you can have 2 matches on the same day without a clash.
Yeah.
In fact, in T20s, you can have 3 matches on the same day without a clash.
Yeah. Very much. And if we are going ahead with the idea of simultaneous broadcasting, which I think will come sooner rather than later, then I do believe 4 matches a day is also possible.
Yeah, because 2 matches have to clash, but that's okay.
Yeah, that happens in the last match.
IPL will have that from next season, I guess. Simultaneous broadcasting, 74 matches. They cannot
because
have
that was the original concept. I mean, in the first ever World Cup, see, there were 8 teams, so there could be 4 simultaneous matches.
Sure.
And the first day saw 4 matches. The next day saw 4 matches. So basically, every team was playing. That I understand that clash because there were 2 channels in England. BBC had 2 channels in England for sports, and they could cover only 2 matches. That is the reason why we didn't get to see Kapil Dev's 175. And so they changed that, but they can always have 2 matches a day. The 1996 World Cup in India had 3 matches in a day, and Doordarshan had 3 channels back then. So we got to see all 3 channels.
I mean,
all
we see in FIFA World Cup, we see 4 matches a day, I guess.
We do. It is during the last round of matches in group stage. To avoid that bit which we were talking about.
That is done with a specific purpose.
Yeah. Well, time for a little break before we resume with all the cricket talk. But before that, the Cricket News Podcast Season 4 is proudly supported by Blitzpools, an app which lets you make the most of your cricket expert and cricket fantasy knowledge and ensures that you and your experience as a fan is never just restricted to watching the game. So, if you haven't already, do download the Blitzpools app right now. Like now. All right, gents, concluding this segment, this episode of the Cricket News Podcast, what would you like to add how teams can address this problem? And we've talked this as far as some of the big teams in world cricket are concerned, but is it possible for every team now to move in with the idea of separate players for separate formats, or is it just going to be a compulsion rather than a choice?
Use separate players for separate plan for your test side 2 years down the line, plan for an ODI, plan for a T20I side, and think on these lines and see whether you absolutely need overlaps. If you do not need an overlap, then do not use an overlap. Use as many. This is particularly true in the case of teams with huge talent pools like India and Australia and England.
Yeah, exactly. That's I believe that only India and Australia, probably England, and to some extent New Zealand can afford to do that. I can't see Bangladesh.
New Zealand sent a second Bangladesh.
Yeah, I cannot see Bangladesh doing that. I mean, I cannot see someone like Sri Lanka doing that.
How many test matches? How many test matches does Bangladesh play anyway?
Yeah.
Or Sri Lanka?
Yeah.
Test cricket invariably involves one of the big 3. Otherwise, it's just a 2 test match series that happens in empty stadiums and with very few people watching, even online.
Yeah.
You've seen how empty the stadiums are for test matches when one of Australia, England, and India is not playing. You've seen that many times. This is not about the COVID period, or this is not about a particular series. We have seen that over time.
Yeah.
How many test matches do these teams play?
Yep.
So I mean,
it's going to be important. Sandipan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I expressed that concern that probably teams with bigger talent pools can afford to do that, but I cannot see Bangladesh. I cannot see West Indies also. I mean, I know that West Indies is known for fielding their second stream sides, but again, I cannot see teams like Bangladesh doing that. But Abhishek has a fair point as well that they don't play of test matches often. So
yeah. Well, it's going to be some task, but it is going to be a necessary task for these teams going ahead. That's it from us in this week of the Cricket News Podcast. Stay tuned for everything about cricket.